What if I told you that a conflict waiting to erupt is simmering right in the heart of Europe? Kaliningrad, a small Russian exclave nestled between Poland and Lithuania, has been labeled as Russia's hidden arsenal for years. It's believed that this territory could be the spark that ignites a war with NATO. There, weapons are stockpiled, and missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads loom ominously. Yet, the narrative spun by the Kremlin seems to veil a greater truth, one of vulnerability rather than strength. As Vladimir Putin struggles to maintain control, his grip on Kaliningrad appears to be loosening. The verbiage from Moscow is frantic, revealing an underlying fear. Putin doesn't show his panic openly, instead, he sends armies of spokespersons, hurling threats at whomever will listen. One of the most vocal is Sergei Lavrov, who has turned claiming NATO aggression into his trademark ever since Russia initiated its controversial special military operation in Ukraine. In May 2022, Lavrov proclaimed that the collective West had declared a total hybrid war on Russia, fueled by their support for Ukraine through sanctions and military assistance. Amidst an atmosphere thick with erroneous claims, he declared, "We did everything to avoid a direct clash, but now that the challenge has been thrown down, we of course accept it." Behind his rhetoric, the Kremlin's message is crystal clear: the West is the aggressor, while Russia is prepared to respond. Fast forward to September 2025, Lavrov is still singing the same song. This time, he further insists that everyone supporting Ukraine is declaring war on Russia, as Europe reacts to its persistent aggressions. His appearance at a G20 meeting saw him reiterate claims of Western provocation driven by aid to Ukraine. Lavrov even implies that NATO, the European Union, and the UN are directly engaged in conflict with Russia, orchestrating a narrative that paints Russia as the perennial victim. What drives this desperate need to portray Russia as a victim? It's an attempt to shift blame and prevent scrutiny of its expansive military endeavors. In truth, it's a strategy born from fear, and one that dictates the Kremlin's anxieties towards its own territories, particularly Kaliningrad. Concentrating on Lavrov's words sheds light on the Kremlin's crumbling reality, masked behind posturing and threats. Is Putin poring over maps, realizing that his precious exclave is more vulnerable than ever? Lavrov's words aim to galvanize support within Russia, masking the inevitable losses faced on the battlefield and the heavy sanctions crippling the economy. The narrative is desperate, but does it convince a weary public? This story of Kaliningrad reveals an unsettling truth. As Russia seeks to intimidate the world, the real fear may be of its own people waking up to the gravity of their situation. Beyond Kaliningrad lies a nation torn by dissenting views, and the struggle for control could unravel everything. Jump ahead to September 2025. Where echoes of familiar deceit still rumble through the air like distant thunder. Lavrov, that unyielding voice of shadows, once more spins tales that twist the world's resolve. In his warped view, merely standing with Ukraine marks you as a declared foe of Russia, because Europe dares to push back against relentless onslaughts, as any land would when provoked. Visualize the chill of a UN chamber, fluorescent lights humming softly, the faint scent of polished wood and stale coffee lingering as diplomats huddle. At the Group of 20, or G20, Summit for Foreign Ministers, Lavrov spits out the same venom. The West ignited this turmoil by bolstering Ukraine's stand against Russian might. But he escalates the madness, insisting NATO, the European Union, and even the UN are locked in outright war with Russia. Is this the cry of a cornered beast, or a calculated ploy? This fabricated tale has festered for years, fueling Russia's obsession with casting itself as the perpetual innocent, ignoring the carnage unleashed on Ukraine, while labeling Europe's defenses as the spark of battle. The real conflict? Russia lit it long ago, through invasion and iron grip. What hidden poison lurks in these accusations, you wonder? Peeling back the layers reveals a crumbling fortress. Artem Dikarev, the sharp-witted host of the Russian Dude channel, deciphers it as blind desperation, Russia's frantic bid to parade as the bullied underdog in its standoff with NATO. Feel the tension coiling like a spring. In this frenzy, Lavrov's rants tie directly to Kaliningrad's perilous edge. Dikarev cuts through the fog, at the G20, at the UN, at any posh gathering he infiltrates. Lavrov peddles Putin's wild fiction: the West has waged open war on Russia. The bite of his words: Kaliningrad, encircled by fiends, will face Moscow's unyielding comeback. Russia postures as the endless sufferer, erasing its own savagery in Ukraine, claiming every European shield for itself and Kiev as the true dawn of war. But the battle ignited first, from Russia's own fiery deeds. This mask of eternal victimhood veils a forbidden truth, a secret the Kremlin dreads exposure. Dive beneath Lavrov's boasts, his blustery efforts to cow the West from retaliatory steps. What if his signals betray not Russia's broad strength, but the fragility of Kaliningrad, that pivotal stronghold for projecting dominance? Dykharov unmasks it, beneath the bravado, the boasts, the vows of crushing rebuttals, a shattering truth simmers. The Kremlin cowers in terror. What dread revelation might shatter their facade next, as the exclave teeters on unraveling threads? Imagine this jaw-dropping twist. Could Russia's most feared enclaves actually be slipping through Putin's fingers like sand through clenched fists? What if the chest-thumping threats from Moscow's top diplomats are really desperate screams echoing in the void? That chill runs down your spine when you realize the Kremlin might be hiding its deepest fears behind a curtain of bluster. 312 characters. Previously, we uncovered how Russia's endless victim narrative masks a terrifying secret. The Kremlin's panic deepens when we decode Lavrov's fearmongering, exposing cracks in their attempts to cow the West. Now, dive deeper into the hidden message targeting not just the world, but a vulnerable stronghold. Lavrov whispers a signal he never meant to broadcast. One that screams about the whole Russian heartland. But especially that crucial Kaliningrad bastion, long the launchpad for their might. Beneath the swirling smoke of false bravery, the pounding chest beats, and hollow promises of swift retribution, crumbles a stark truth. Dykharov reveals. The Kremlin lives in sheer terror. In his eyes, Lavrov's outbursts resemble the frenzied mutters of a cornered beast. Eyes darting, sweat beading on his forehead. Knowing Western forces could snatch Kaliningrad away in a heartbeat. Why then? Why hurl those words not at NATO foes? Or imagined adversaries? But inward? Dykharov probes the paradox. Putin and his echo rely on these menace tactics to radiate strength to their own people, shielding them from the supposed onslaughts on the state. And this strategy? It might spark flames. At least in mainland Russia, where the masses feast on feeds from state-run news channels. Reporters Without Borders paints a bleak picture. Roughly two-thirds of Russians gulp down nearly all their info from television screens. State-owned puppets puppeteering the story straight from the Kremlin's lips. Right this second, Lavrov's diatribes are calibrated to drill in. NATO and the EU loom as shadows. Russia must steel itself. Forge ahead. Sure. Many Russians tap into the web's wide world. Reporters Without Borders notes Russia's sky-high connectivity rates. Yet, cracks appear rarely. The Kremlin's propaganda wall stands tall. Leap ahead to Cedar's March 2025 study. It unveils how indie voices still whisper in Russia, dodging the censor's iron grip. But most fledgling dissent flees to online havens. Web realms rife with echoes. Telegram serves as their refuge. Yet a staggering 44% of surveyed Russians confess they cling only to government-approved streams. Contrast that whisper, barely 14% tune into what Cedar labels resistor feeds. A stark sign that Russians, willing captives, march hand in hand with the regime down propaganda paths. Twists curling like thorns in the dark. What ghastly rage builds now? Kaliningrad teeters, risking overthrow if Moscow falters in turning its own against alleged NATO threats. But here's the shocking fracture. What if Putin's elite toadies realize they can't hoodwink the shrewd ones anymore? Does that mean their charade targets the gullible, whispering that sanctions hunger pangs? Battlefield losses. Economic hemorrhages. Are noble costs as NATO attacks? Will this web of lies unravel in Kaliningrad, detonating the Kremlin's grip on its prized outpost? Picture the exclave streets. Tension thickening like fog. Winds carrying distant thunder. Is the Kremlin on the brink of losing a cornerstone? As Lavrov's veiled admissions spill the truth in whispers? In recent years, Kaliningrad has been shrouded in mystery, often referred to as Russia's hidden trump card. This small enclave, nestled between Poland and Lithuania, is believed by many to be the potential flashpoint for a conflict with NATO. Allegedly, it houses a significant arsenal, including missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The Kremlin presents a facade of confidence, asserting that its grip on this critical territory is ironclad. But appearances can be deceiving. As the rhetoric from Moscow intensifies, signals of vulnerability emerge. The true situation in Kaliningrad reveals a different story. Despite the bravado, Vladimir Putin's control is faltering. The very officials tasked with projecting strength seem increasingly frantic, with Sergei Lavrov, a top Kremlin spokesperson, leading the charge. His consistent claims that NATO is waging a hybrid war against Russia started in the wake of Putin's aggressive actions in Ukraine. The narrative is one of victimization, claiming that Western support for Ukraine has escalated to outright aggression. Fast forward to September 2025, and Lavrov continues to echo the same threats. At the G20 meeting, he asserted that contending with NATO is a necessity, whimpering about a fabricated crisis that paints Western countries as antagonists. This rhetoric is not just noise, it's a desperate cry rooted in fear. The strategy behind this narrative suggests that Lavrov aims to rally domestic support by framing Russia as the wronged party suffering under Western pressure. But as Artem Dikarev, a commentator on Russian affairs, explains, this attempt to depict Russia as a perennial victim conveniently overlooks the brutal realities created by Russian aggression. Yet, the illusion of control crumbles when one considers the populace of Kaliningrad. Unlike the broader Russian public, who may uncritically consume state-sponsored narratives, the residents of this enclave have their own insights. For them, the claims that NATO and Europe are enemies ring hollow. They see through the propaganda, creating a fissure between the Kremlin's intentions and the public's perception. The real question hangs in the air: can the Kremlin maintain a grip on Kaliningrad when its own citizens perceive NATO as an unnecessary threat rather than a looming danger? The Kremlin's narrative consistently shifts, aiming to solidify unity among Russians by scapegoating NATO while fanning the flames of fear regarding a looming European threat. However, the expansion of NATO, a reality born not from mere aggression but from the palpable fears of Russia's neighbors, adds fuel to this fire. Countries seeking security in alliances have formed strong coalitions, much to the Kremlin's chagrin. Could it be that the very actions intended to bolster Russia's security are endangering its hold on Kaliningrad? With each accusation hurled by Lavrov, Russia's desperation becomes more apparent. Behind the bluster lies a troubling acknowledgement: the Kremlin is aware of the fortress it may lose. The push for solidarity through sensationalized threats may work among a portion of the Russian populace, but it falls short in the face of reality for residents of Kaliningrad. What happens when people begin to question the motives of their leaders? The likelihood grows that Putin's grip on Kaliningrad may wane, leading to consequences neither he nor Lavrov seems ready to face. As we delve deeper into the complexities of Russia's situation, the question must be asked: can fear truly function as a glue to hold power, or does it merely obscure the fissures waiting to unravel? The unfolding dynamics in Kaliningrad might just provide the answer. In the previous segment, we explored how Russia's exaggerated claims about NATO hide the truth. Putin dispatched Sergei Lavrov to deflect accusations, while hinting at internal fears about Kaliningrad. But what if Russia's own brutal history crafted this crisis? Is the Kremlin staging a desperate act to cling to power? Picture the chill of a Moscow winter, snow crunching under boots as soldiers march past Red Square. The air reeks of diesel fumes from tanks rumbling by. Raw aggression stains that memory, a taste of unearned dominance. Russia clings to a shred of legitimacy. It argues NATO's spread threatens them. Yet, as Artem Dikarev reveals, expansion occurred because Russia's neighbors recoiled. They gazed at Moscow's patterns, invasions etched like scars. Nope, they declared, slamming doors shut. Does expansion sting? Absolutely. NATO swelled over decades. The Copenhagen Council on NATO Invariance charts this. Under Putin since 2000. Members surged from 19 to around 31. Nations like Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia joined. Painful for Russia? The Baltic trio of Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania became allies in 2004. close enough to encircle Kaliningrad, like wolves closing in. Worse still. Finland and Sweden, once neutral bastions, defected in 2023 and 2024. Responses to Ukrainian horror shows. Russia's savagery ignited this fire. Georgia's annexation in 2008. Crimea's theft in 2014. Ukraine's 2022 carnage. Each atrocity fueled NATO's growth, transforming it into a shield against Kremlin wrath. Lavrov buries these sins, hurling counterfeuds. He insists NATO and the EU aggress, plotting Kaliningrad's downfall. Rebukes morph into threats, echoing Putin's paranoia. Yet, twist here, Russia's rhetoric reveals weakness. Forcing sacrifices on citizens? Sanctions biting like frost, sons vanishing into mud, economy hemorrhaging. All to mask greed as necessity. Lavrov's words? Not for foes, but internal hypnosis. Could Kaliningrad shatter first? Wind shift, the exclave teetering. As Lavrov spews fury, does ego blind reality? Or will truth erupt, humbling the loudmouth elite? What if the decisive response explodes in their faces, a pivotal betrayal looming? From earlier, Russia's actions have sparked Kaliningrad's potential downfall. Putin knows this deep down. So, he deploys Lavrov to deny NATO and the EU's accusations of Russian aggression. And, as usual, Lavrov pairs each denial with a menacing warning. Picture this, is the EU plotting a bold strike at Kaliningrad? Are the Kremlin's threats just a mask for growing panic? Lavrov, Putin's sharp-tongued envoy, now accuses the EU of devising an overt assault on Kaliningrad. He vows Russia's decisive blows in return. The buzzer of tension hums in the air, thick like fog over the Baltic Sea. He lashes out at the arming of Bornholm Island. The cold metal of guns clangs against crates, loaded and ready. Why? He calls it NATO and EU schemes for dominance in the region. But let's cut through the bluster, almost every Baltic nation is NATO-aligned now. Kaliningrad stands as Russia's last foothold there. A lonely speck. Lavrov overlooks the truth, these fortifications surge due to Russia's shadow looming over Europe. Reality stings, NATO and the EU pose a grave danger to Kaliningrad. But not as invaders. Only if Russia provokes it. For now, the West lets Russia simmer in its self-made turmoil. Actions around the exclave fray the Kremlin's nerves further. Islands buzz with military buildup, the salty spray of the sea mists their routines. Stronger walls rise in Poland and the Baltics. Sandbags thud into place, wires humming with current. Terrified leaders watch from the shadows. What's coming next as Russia scrambles? Could a sudden isolation shatter Putin's fading hold? Stay tuned, as the pressure mounts like a vice on Kaliningrad's throat. So, in the heart of escalating tensions, Russia finds itself cornered by its own isolation tactics, from fortified borders in Poland and the Baltics to ominous actions that whisper of impending loss in Kaliningrad. Imagine this, could the mighty Russian bear really be on the brink of losing even the power to illuminate its strategic jewels in Kaliningrad? Here's a shocking twist that hits like a thunderclap. What if the lights in Russia's exclave flicker out, not from enemy bombs, but from its neighbors simply unplugging the cord? Dive into the paranoia gripping the Kremlin, where every boast hides a crumbling facade. 348 characters, the Kremlin spins webs of accusations, claiming NATO's shadow looms as a dire threat to Kaliningrad. Yet, beneath that bluster, Russia's words drip with desperation, revealing a fragile hold unraveling at the seams. Picture Lavrov's voice echoing in cavernous halls, sharp, insistent, but laced with the metallic tang of fear, like sweat beading on a brow in stifling heat. He rails against Western aid to Ukraine as a hybrid war, his phrases hammering home the myth that Russia stands strong and ready. But does he? Feel the grit underfoot as we expose how these same boasts mask mounting chaos, where power projections crumble into pained confessions. Why does this rhetoric scream vulnerability instead of vigor? It's as if the winds whispering through Kaliningrad's pines carry sense of abandonment, not triumph. And now, an unexpected shift in perspective, Russia may soon grapple with a future starved of energy flowing to Kaliningrad. As Euractiv unveils, the Baltic region is severing ties with Russia's power grid, a decisive divorce that could plunge the exclave into darkness. While this slashes energy revenues fueling Putin's war machine, it strikes closer to home for the Baltic outpost. Kaliningrad clings to that very grid like a lifeline in stormy seas, the hum of turbines its steady heartbeat. When the Baltics unplug, they'll drag the exclave along, forsaking a region with no alternatives. Touch the icy chill of that reality, the exclave's cold concrete surfaces, once proud, now rugged and foreboding. What does this isolation portend? The Baltics forge ahead with new connections, their warm, unwavering lights a stark contrast to Kaliningrad's potential void. Lavrov's every utterance now betrays weakness, exposed like cracks in ancient stone walls, forsaking claims of invasions for admissions of eroded pride. Dykharov cuts through the fog with razor insight, noting how NATO's words pierce Russia's fragile ego. It's more than military maneuvers, it's humiliation pulsing like a wound, where Kaliningrad's vulnerability stains Putin's image in deep, irrevocable shades. The touch of shame lingers, heavy and unyielding. Who feels the sting most? The leader whose grip slips, shrouded in the earthy musk of deceit. This slander phobia feeds a greater terror, one that coils tighter than barbed wire. Consider the blunt words from U.S. Army Europe and Africa Commander Chris Donahue in July, amid soaring tensions. He declared NATO could seize Kaliningrad in a timeframe that is unheard of, a statement echoing with the crack of certainty, not hollow bravado. Unlike Russia's threats, which fade like echoes in empty valleys, this hits hard, disclosing the tenuous threads binding Russia to its exclave. Smell the sulfurous scent of paranoia rising from the soil? All that seeping dread culminates in a revelation: Putin's facade crumbles, his delusions laid bare by Western resolve. But will the Kremlin admit it, or double down into oblivion? What hidden fractures will emerge next in this high-stakes chess game? The words hang like unresolved thunder, promising more turmoil ahead. The tension between Russia and NATO has reached a boiling point, with Kaliningrad standing on the front lines of this conflict. For years, this exclave has been described as Russia's stronghold, where a potential war with NATO might ignite. But what if the Kremlin's grip is slipping? Reports indicate that a prominent NATO commander has made a chilling claim: Kaliningrad could be seized without a fight. This isn't mere speculation, it reveals a deeper paranoia creeping through Russian leadership, particularly through the actions of President Vladimir Putin. In an effort to display strength, Russia is constructing a mammoth radar installation in Kaliningrad. News of this project surfaced in mid-August, with satellite images capturing the development of a massive circular disposed antenna array. Located just 25 kilometers from the Polish border, this array is supposed to signal that Russia is closely monitoring NATO. However, the construction seems more like a desperate stand against a growing sense of insecurity rather than a declaration of power. Artem Dykharov, host of the Russian Dude channel, emphasizes a critical perspective: to the Russian media, it's proof of strength, he argues. But to NATO, it's a flashing neon sign of insecurity. Instead of instilling fear, this grand undertaking has merely underscored Russia's vulnerability. What was intended to be a show of defiance has evoked a distinctly different reaction. NATO's response? A collective indifference. Rather than panic, the alliance is poised to enhance defenses in Poland and the Baltic states, effectively neutralizing what the Kremlin hoped would be a power projection. Amidst these developments, Putin's denial of interest in an arms race sounds hollow. The truth is, even the largest radar array won't shield Kaliningrad from modern military capabilities, should conflict arise. The looming question now is, what will happen when NATO decides it's time to take decisive action? Every attempt to assert dominance only reveals the fragility of Russia's position. The clock is ticking as this tension escalates, and once a spark ignites, will Kaliningrad still stand strong? The answer lies just beyond the horizon, shrouded in uncertainty and peril. In the shadow of escalating tensions between Russia and NATO, Kaliningrad stands as a ticking bomb, one of the most pivotal and precarious territories in the global arena. This Russian exclave is bordered by Poland and Lithuania and has been labeled a potential launchpad for conflict. However, there is an unsettling truth lurking beneath the surface: Putin's control over Kaliningrad may be weakening. Consider this: the massive radar systems Putin has boasted about since his presidential victories, do they really bolster Kaliningrad's defenses? Or do they serve as a mere facade, a symbol projecting power that, if challenged, could quickly crumble? In 2018, Putin repeatedly insisted that he was not interested in an arms race, yet his actions tell a different tale. The construction of such extensive military infrastructure suggests a desperate attempt to maintain an image of dominance in the eyes of both NATO and the people of Kaliningrad. But what about those who actually reside in Kaliningrad? There's a hidden narrative that's crucial to understand. Many do not identify with Russian nationalism in the same way that those living on the mainland do. They are not just geography's pawns, they desire connection with Europe, with their neighbors, with a lifestyle that reflects their aspirations. The people of Kaliningrad breathe Europe, asserts Artem Dikarev, host of the Russian Dude channel. They venture into Poland and Lithuania for shopping or work, a stark contrast to the isolation that Moscow often imposes on them. This disconnection may sow the seeds for their ultimate defection from Russian influence, especially as the realities of economic hardship and military posturing permeate their lives. The more Russia tries to control the narrative, fueled by Lavrov's fiery proclamations of a Western war against Russia, the clearer it becomes that Kaliningrad is increasingly viewing itself through a different lens. The overwhelming grip of propaganda serves to obscure an undeniable truth. While Russia perceives NATO as a looming threat, many in Kaliningrad yearn for liberation from that very grip. As we look closer at this situation, ask yourself, what happens when a territory's spirit yearns for freedom? The answer lies just beyond the horizon, as Putin's tight grasp might soon unravel in the heart of Kaliningrad, a place with the potential to redefine itself against the backdrop of a crumbling empire. The conflict isn't just military, it's a battle for identity, one that could tip the scales of power in a region screaming for change. Would the Kremlin dare to face a rebellion from within, ignited by the very people it seeks to control? The answer may shock you. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the forces at play in Kaliningrad, revealing how the echoing footsteps of history threaten to repeat themselves, and how the future of this once solid territory remains uncertain amid a shifting landscape. Imagine this. In a flash of raw panic, Russian officials claimed victory in Verbov village, only for their troops to be smashed back seconds after stumbling in. Has the Kremlin's bravado finally cracked? That's the shocking truth exposing Putin's crumbling empire right now. We're picking up from where we left off, tensions boiling in Kaliningrad, where daily life feels like a vice tightening, sanctions strangling trade like an invisible noose, tourism evaporating into thin air leaving empty streets reeking of desperation, prices clawing upward while paychecks sit frozen like a winter storm. Artem Dikarev captures the agony, economic bleedouts and regional unrest fueling a quiet revolt against Moscow's iron fist. Yet, every outburst from Sergei Lavrov about shielding Kaliningrad draws only eye rolls from locals. Why? Because they feel the true sting of the Kremlin's games, pocketing the brunt while leaders posture. Peeling back Putin's propaganda curtain reveals a facade as shaky as old plaster. On the face of it, Russia hammers out its usual script, NATO bears fangs, and will repel them to safeguard the exclave. But scratch the surface, and vulnerability oozes out, reeking of fierce sweat in diplomatic halls. Vladimir Putin grasps the stark reality, NATO holds the power to shatter Kaliningrad's chains anytime. Still, why storm the gates when time might simply unravel Russia's hold? Patience could force the Kremlin to loosen its death grip from within. And since Ukraine's invasion ignited the flames, that once iron clutch has frayed like worn rope. Frayed and slippery under the weight of public dissent. Lavrov's frenzied tirades echo with the desperation of a cornered beast, howling threats that mask one undeniable fact: control slips away, inch by inch. Dive into this web of deceit. Russia peddles images of unyielding might, but Ukraine's just ripped that mask clean off. Again. Officious bulletins crowed about seizing Verbov, painting a picture of triumph, boots thudding in mud, rifles clinking in victory's march. Yet, what aromas filled the air? Not laurels, but the acrid smoke of failure, as Ukrainian forces obliterated the intruders mere moments after they trespassed. Video evidence seared the truth, Russian claims evaporated like mist under sunlight, exposing lies that taste bitter in the mouth. What's next in this shadow war? Will Kaliningrad revolt at last, toppling Putin's tottering throne? Or is a devastating counterstrike brewing in the Baltic gloom? Stay tuned, the horizon flashes with rebellion's lightning, promising storms no one can dodge. What hidden fracture will be the Kremlin's fatal blow? You won't believe the twist ahead, feel the air thicken with betrayal's chill breath clasping your heart. Is Russia's Iron Curtain about to be torn apart forever? In the shadows of desperate deceit, imagine Russian heralds proclaiming a phantom victory in Verbove, their fake triumphs crumbling seconds later under Ukrainian fire. Has the Kremlin's web of lies finally ensnared itself? That's the electrifying revelation that could dismantle Putin's crumbling fortress in an instant of truth. Building on the mounting strife we discussed. Where Kaliningrad's residents endure a choking gloom, sanctions crushing commerce with a vice-like grip, tourism vanishing like fading echoes in an empty hall, prices soaring high while incomes lie stagnant under a blanket of neglect. Artem Dikarev voices the gut-wrenching reality: the exclave bleeds from economic wounds inflicted by the Kremlin's reckless wars. Each tirade from Sergei Lavrov bragging about protecting Kaliningrad elicits weary sighs from the locals, the kind that carry the sour tang of betrayal. Why do they sneer? They shoulder the agonizing toll of Moscow's theatrics, costs biting deep into their everyday struggles, while leaders deflect real blame. Return to the heart of Putin's manipulative machine. Outwardly, it spews the familiar bile: NATO hounds us relentlessly, and will crush them to defend this prized exclave. Dig deeper, though, and the facade crumbles, emitting a stench of raw terror. Vladimir Putin confronts the brutal core: NATO possesses the might to dismantle Kaliningrad whenever it chooses. Yet, invasion might prove unnecessary. Simply waiting could awaken the exclave spirit to slip free from a grip that once felt unbreakable. Since the Ukraine conflict ignited, that hold has weakened dramatically, slackening ropes allowing flickers of freedom. Lavrov's manic blusters pulse with panic, betraying a regime hovering on the brink of losing command entirely. Picture the irony twisting like a knife. While Russia spins tales of insurmountable power, Ukraine delivers a stinging reality check once more. Press releases boasted dominance over Verbove soil, evoking images of triumphant boots stamping in soft earth. But what sensations flooded the scene? The grounding thud of defeat, amid the metallic clang of dashed hopes, as verified footage showed hostile forces annihilated almost immediately upon entry. Truth pierced the illusion, leaving a bitter aftertaste of exposed falsehoods in the air. Anaerobic: what seismic shift lurks beneath? Could Kaliningrad's undercurrent of unrest surge into outright defection? The final hinge swings. Anticipate the shocking jolt where alliances fracture, vengeance surges like thunder, and fate conspires in a betrayal so profound it chills the marrow. Is Russia's grip doomed to shatter spectrally? Prepare for the revelation that will leave you breathless with astonishment.